This is where the flame of liberty burns bright. This is the Jason Veely Program.
Hello, my friends. Jason Veely here. You're listening to the Jason Veely Program. Hey, if you want to get in touch with me, it's really quite simple. JasonVeelyRadio@gmail.com. That's JAYSONVELEY radio@gmail.com. So simple that even a liberal could do it. So it's come to my attention, folks, that Mark Zuckerberg, Marky Mark, the founder of Facebook, CEO of Facebook, will be testifying next week before the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, where he will apparently discuss the company's use and protection of user data. So, folks, obviously Facebook has been in the news a lot lately about this very thing, about the collection of data, about how they essentially sell information about millions of users to third parties and kind of turn a blind eye and don't really care what those third parties are doing with the information. And so Mark Zuckerberg is now in the middle of a huge controversy, and next week he's going to be testifying before a House committee. And so as that day comes, I believe it's next Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll cover that on this program. Well, I'll give you my thoughts and so on and so forth, because frankly, this is an issue that deserves attention. I mean, the mass collection of user data without their knowledge or consent, that's a big deal. Here's something else that I wish was a big deal but isn't to many people, unfortunately. I wish people were as concerned about Facebook's censorship of conservatives as they were about this data collection. I'm not trying to minimize what Mark Zuckerberg and his team did with this mass data collection. I completely understand the privacy violations. I completely get all that. And it really, like I said, it's something that could and should be addressed and talked about, and we will. But I wish Facebook's censorship was getting as much attention as Facebook's privacy violations. Because frankly, folks, Facebook has a long, long history of explicitly targeting, suppressing, and censoring conservative content. And they try to do it in different sneaky ways, backdoor ways, but more and more people are waking up to this. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this here tonight is because I saw an article up on Breitbart.com talking about an interview that Mark Zuckerberg did with Vox, the ultra-left-wing online publication. And in this interview, this is according again to Breitbart News, he explained Facebook's new system of favoring, quote, broadly trusted news sources. Facebook's new system of favoring broadly trusted, those are his words, news sources, via a mechanism designed to favor established outlets and crush new media. Now, how do you think Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, a hardcore leftist and an ideologue, defines broadly trusted? Do you think he defines broadly trusted as anything even remotely conservative? Of course not. He defines broadly trusted as CNN, MSNBC, NBC, the left-wing publications, because he's a leftist. Let me read you a little bit. Facebook introduced its new system in January. Now, this is a big deal. I honestly haven't heard about this new system up until a few days ago, and the second I heard about it, I said to myself, I gotta talk about this on radio because this isn't right. Something's going on here. Facebook introduced its new system in January, and the results were immediately apparent. Listen to this. Facebook traffic to establishment outlets, including CNN and NBC, soared upwards, while traffic to conservative outlets fell. Don't tell me this isn't intentional. Don't tell me this isn't all part of Mark Zuckerberg's plot Of course it is. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I mean, the writing's on the wall, folks. Look what's going on. Oh, and in addition to traffic to conservative outlets plummeting, Facebook engagement on President Trump's posts fell by 45%. Oh, Jason, it's just a coincidence. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, he's not targeting conservative news. Of course he is. You have to be blind to not accept that. In his Vox interview, Mark Zuckerberg explained these changes as neutrally as he could, talking about providing a more, quote, meaningful experience for Facebook users. A more meaningful experience. You know, if you're going to go out and censor conservatives, target conservative news outlets, you got to put a nice spin on it. Yeah, you know, we understand how this might look like we're censoring conservative news, but, you know, we're just really trying to create a more meaningful experience for Facebook users. All right, got it, Mark. Zuckerberg outlined 3 categories of fake news: spammers, state actors, and, quote, now listen to this, real media outlets who are saying what they think is true, but have varying levels of accuracy or trustworthiness. And who exactly, Marky, is going to determine which news outlets are trustworthy and accurate? You and your leftist friends? Is that what's going to happen? Apparently it already is. This is how Zuckerberg explained what they're doing in the interview. He said, this year we've rolled out a number of changes to Newsfeed that try to boost in the ranking broadly trusted news sources. We've surveyed people across the whole community and asked them whether they trust different news sources. So according to him, and I have a hard time believing this is exactly how it went, but according to him, they reached out to people from all across the spectrum on Facebook and determined which news sources they trust the most. And once they got their answers, they kind of modified Facebook's algorithm for their news feed to make it so that these quote-unquote trusted news sources are more widely engaged with, seen more, interacted with more, etc. Got that? He went on. He said, take the Wall Street Journal or New York... Now, this part, folks, exposes where Zuckerberg's mind is at. Remember I said, the key here is how he defines broadly trusted. How he defines trusted news sources. Listen to what he said. Zuckerberg said, take the Wall Street Journal or New York Times. Even if not everyone reads them, the people who don't read them typically still think they're good, trustworthy journalism. All right, let me stop right there. I don't read the New York Times. I never will. At least if I'm looking for, trustworthy news. Almost every single conservative that I know, and I'm connected with a lot of them through social media and so on and so forth, they don't read New York Times when they're looking for trustworthy news. And I guarantee you, the vast majority of them, if not all of them, would say that no, the New York Times is not an example of trustworthy journalism. I don't know where he's getting this idea that, well, I would argue that most people, even if they don't read the New York Times, think they're trustworthy journalism. No. Chances are, if you're not reading the New York Times, you're doing it because you don't think it's trustworthy journalism. Is this guy living under a rock, by the way? I'm just curious because it seems like, he doesn't have any idea or any insight into how people really feel about these news outlets. Broadly trusted. People trust it. No, they don't. New York Times? Are you kidding me? He went on. He said, whereas if you get down to blogs that may be on more of the fringe, they'll have their strong supporters, but people who don't necessarily read them often don't trust them as much. So now he's talking about, the smaller blogs, independent media, and so on and so forth. While they might have their strong supporters, people who don't necessarily read them often don't trust them as much. So he's saying that, all right, so listen to what he's saying here. Let me try to summarize. He's arguing, foolishly I might add, that even people who don't read the New York Times, believe that the New York Times is an example of trustworthy journalism. Strike one. On the contrary, he says, when it comes to smaller blogs, websites that he considers to be on the fringe, people who don't read these websites typically don't trust them. Really? Really? What is he basing this off of? I want to see some facts, some research, some studies on. I mean, especially if you're going to use this as a basis to modify your platform to target people with a particular political philosophy. I want to see some statistics. Or is this all just coming from your head based on what you think is going on? Marky? Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. I don't know how many of you listening or watching right now knew about this new algorithm that they introduced in January. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I really couldn't. Talking about how he's going to be favoring establishment media outlets now, like CNN and NBC, helping them out, boosting them on news feeds, while smothering independent journalism, smaller blogs, and so on and so forth. Folks, I want to ask you a question. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that Mark Zuckerberg and his team really were targeting fake news. I mean real fake news. News that just was not accurate. Not talking about conservative news. I mean real fake news. Should they be allowed to do that? Even if it's fake news, even if it is legitimately fake, should a company like this, should Mark Zuckerberg be engaging in this sort of activity in the first place? Smothering different blogs just because they might not be entirely accurate? See, the whole premise I have a problem with. I really don't care necessarily if whether, how accurate one news source is versus the other, how trustworthy one outlet is versus another one. That really doesn't matter to me, folks. The problem here is that we have one of the biggest social media giants in the world. One of the biggest social media giants in the world who is openly talking about smothering blogs and smaller outlets and so on and so forth. That's a problem to me. I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that. We have this thing in this country called the First Amendment. I understand that Mark Zuckerberg, he's a very, very wealthy guy, runs a very, very successful social media platform and so on and so forth. But damn it, the Constitution is above all of that. The First Amendment is above all of that. I don't think the First Amendment says, if this isn't 100% accurate, then come along and bury it on the internet. Or suppress it, or censor it. I don't think that's what the First Amendment says, does it? Anyway, let me get on to this. Just to give you an example of how Facebook's new algorithm is actually working at this point. This article is from yesterday. Again, Breitbart News. Facebook labels all Breitbart stories as intentionally misleading with Wikipedia pop-up. So, remember when I said, folks, that Facebook is kind of trying to take a backdoor way of censoring conservative news, saying that it's in the best interest of their users and so on and so forth, not explicitly saying that we're targeting conservatives, but they're doing it anyway. Remember I said that? This is exactly what I mean. They say that, we're just targeting fake news. We're just going after news that isn't accurate. What they mean is we're going after news that is conservative. Facebook is displaying a link to Wikipedia's smear job description of Breitbart News next to all Breitbart articles shared on the site. The link to Wikipedia article describes Breitbart as a, quote, far-right site that publishes falsehoods, conspiracy theories, and intentionally misleading stories. Now, does anyone else see the irony in Facebook using, or pointing to, I should say, Wikipedia as an authority? Does anyone else see the irony in this? So, folks, what's going on here, and again, I think that this is directly related to their new algorithm that is meant to promote mainstream news outlets. What's going on here is that if you take a link from Breitbart News, and I haven't tried this, maybe some of you have. If you take a link from Breitbart News and you post it on Facebook, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a pop-up with a link to the Wikipedia page for Breitbart. And on this Wikipedia page, it's basically nothing but a smear article, a smear campaign. That's what it is. A smear job, as Breitbart calls it. This Wikipedia article calls Breitbart a far-right site that publishes falsehoods, conspiracy theories, none of which is true. None of which is true. And now you begin to see, ladies and gentlemen, how Facebook is trying to intimidate, harass, coerce individuals who are conservative and who share conservative news. It's not about creating a better experience for all of Facebook users. It's not about finding the truth. It's not about any of that. What Facebook is doing here, folks, is targeting conservatives. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing more, nothing less. This is why I've been so skeptical of this whole fake news movement, especially when it comes from the left. When they go out there and they say that, we've got to do something about this fake news. When these social media sites come out and say, we're launching this new campaign to combat fake news on our platform, I get a little skeptical, and you should too. Because what we've seen time and time and time again is that what they mean by fake news is conservative news. Conservative news. And I just want Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and his team to know that we're on to them. Oh, yes, we're on to them. We absolutely are. They might think they're being sneaky. They might think that they're going under the radar. We're on to them, folks. And by the way, it's not just Facebook. It's not just Facebook who's participating in this sort of anti-conservative content campaign that's masked and disguised as a anti-fake news campaign. I mean, folks, just a few days ago, I talked about what YouTube did to my video challenging David Hogg to a debate. They took it down. They said that it was, I think, harassment and bullying. I think that was how they described it. It was nothing of the sort. You look at what's going on with Prager University on YouTube. They had to go through an entire lawsuit because so many of their videos were being taken off of YouTube, being censored, even though they weren't controversial at all. And if they were, who the hell cares? You look at what's going on with Steven Crowder and YouTube being censored. Twitter has participated in this sort of thing. It really is rampant, folks. It's not just exclusive to Facebook. I did spend a lot of time talking about Facebook tonight because, well, I wanted to share with you information about this new algorithm that they introduced, this new system, favoring broadly trusted news sources. Oh, broadly trusted news. That's right. NBC, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, yeah, they're all broadly trusted news, Mark Zuckerberg. I'll be right back.
You're listening to the Jason Veely Program, the ultimate escape from political correctness.
Welcome back to the show, folks. You know, I really would encourage you to do your own research on this. Do your own research. I could spend 2, 3, 4 hours talking about not only Facebook's attack on conservatives, but also YouTube's attack on conservatives, Twitter's attack on conservatives, Google's attack on conservatives, although I know them and YouTube are really one and the same. Really, folks, what it is conservatives are running out of space on the internet. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. And I really would. Do a Google search. Look this stuff up. I mean, it's you know, Fox News has covered this sort of thing. A lot of other major publications have covered these instances of censorship. I know my friend Kaden Calger has covered some. It's a really big problem. It's more widespread than I can express in the limited time we have tonight. I'll continue talking about it in future episodes, but I just, for the time being, look it up. Look it up. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm really at a point, folks, where I would almost favor government regulation, some kind of law prohibiting this sort of censorship. And look, I'm not a regulation guy. I'm not a big government guy. You'll probably never hear me calling for a regulation again. But when it comes to defending the First Amendment, yeah, I think that the government has a right to step in. Then they should. I mean, part of the role of government, folks, is to protect our rights. Defend our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's right. And so I am at a point where I would favor some kind of law, some kind of regulation, some kind of restriction that prohibits Facebook and other social media outlets from engaging in this sort of politicized, ideological, agenda-driven censorship. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. We need to find ways somehow to bolster the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. Until then, until something like that happens, I guarantee you that Facebook's going to continue coming out with new systems, coming out with new ways to suppress conservative news and so on and so forth. Twitter will do the same thing. YouTube will do the same thing. Google will do the same thing. This will continue as long as we allow it to continue. Now, let me ask you a question, folks. Let me ask you a question. If conservatives lose the internet as a platform, you know, as a platform to speak out, to spread our message, where do we go? Where do we go? If the internet is off the table, what's next for us? I mean, you look at all of these different platforms. For example, the mainstream media. It's dominated by liberalism. You look at Hollywood. It's dominated by liberalism. You look at schools, universities, the classroom, dominated by liberalism, right? And so on and so forth. And so my question is, where do we go if we lose the internet? If we can't speak up online, if we can't use social media to advance the conservative message, what is going to be our platform? What is going to be our platform? How are we going to do it? I don't know where we'll go. And folks, in my opinion, this is why this battle for internet freedom, this battle against internet censorship, is so crucial. And this is why, like I said in the beginning of the show, I wish more people were concerned about this and talking about it. Because if we lose the internet as conservatives, as liberty-loving patriots, as Americans, we really have nowhere to turn. And if you ask me, I think that these liberals know that. This takeover, so to speak, of all the major platforms in the country, all the major institutions in the country, the mainstream media, Hollywood, the classroom, the internet, it's all intentional. They are intentionally trying to squeeze conservatives out of the debate, out of the conversation. This is a fight worth having, ladies and gentlemen. If we don't make a stand here, then we're going to continue to lose. That's what's going to happen. It's going to keep getting worse. I'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. So the theme of the night has really been anti-conservative censorship on the internet, right? And we've talked a lot about social media platforms, mostly Facebook, but I've mentioned others. It's not just social media, folks. Here, for example, this article up on Newsmax.com. Amazon bans ad for pro-Trump book. See what they're doing? You see how they play their game? Amazon is refusing to accept advertising for a pro-Trump best-selling book because it carries a picture of the president on its cover. Now, I know what you might be thinking, folks. So what? Amazon is its own company. They can determine what they want people to advertise and what they don't want people to advertise on their site. There's more to this. Let me keep reading. The internet commerce giant was founded by billionaire Jeff Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post. No surprise there. Jeff Bezos is a huge leftist, and so is the Washington Post. He has been a recent target of President Donald Trump's tweets for biased press coverage and getting postal benefits for Amazon at the expense of other retailers. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the president constantly attacking Amazon and Jeff Bezos on Twitter and so on and so forth. But here, in this case, yes, Amazon does deserve to be called out, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Listen, Amazon told publisher Humanix Books by email this week that its ads promoting the book, its title is Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. The ads were rejected because of the political content. The book by New York Times bestselling author Jerome Corsi describes deep state efforts at agencies like the FBI, Department of Justice, and NSA aimed at destroying Trump's presidency. Soon after release, Killing the Deep State soared on bestseller lists and hit the #1 spot on Amazon's own coveted rankings in several categories. Now listen, technically our policies say you cannot advertise anything related to a political candidate, political party, or issue-related ads. An Amazon representative emailed the distributor for Humanix, which is a subsidiary of Newsmax Media. With Trump on the cover, you may continue to get rejected across Amazon marketing services. According to our policies, this book is not allowed to be advertised. Okay, so again, you might be thinking, well, who cares? They're their own business. They can determine what ads they want to allow and what ads they don't want to allow. Here's the catch. Let me keep reading. Amazon did not explain why it is currently running ads from other publishers that promote Trump-related books, including ones critical of the president, such as Russian Roulette by Michael Isikoff, and David Korn. The book Fire and Fury by Michael Wolff and Trumpocracy by David Frum. So all these anti-Trump books on Amazon have launched advertising campaigns, and Amazon has no problem with it. Are these books political? Of course they are. But because they're anti-Trump, well, they get the green check. Okay, go ahead. But here we have a book, a very, very popular book, I might add, called Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. Obviously a pro-Trump book. Amazon comes out and says, no, you can't do an advertising campaign for this because of political content. What about the political content for the other books? What, just because they're anti-Trump, they get a free pass? You know, our rules and regulations say that we're not allowed to, advertise books with political content, but since you make such a strong case against the president here, we're going to give you a free pass. Is that the logic? Is that the mindset? Apparently it is. I mean, we're forced to believe that it is, folks. We're forced to believe that it is. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. I really don't know. This is, it's getting interesting. You see, the problem is that when it comes to Amazon and these social media outlets that I was talking about before, the problem is that they're not philosophically consistent. For example, sites like Amazon say that they're targeting fake news, but they don't mind lies from left-wing sources. In other words, they mind if you're promoting fake news, if that so-called fake news is coming from a conservative source. But if a source like, I don't know, NBC, the New York Times, if they lie about conservatives promoting and perpetuating real fake news, well, then it's okay. They're not philosophically consistent. Here you look at Amazon. They don't allow political ads, they say. Yet they're okay with political ads for a book that attacks Trump. And so this is what I mean. They try to come up with these crafty excuses as to why they're doing what they do. They're trying to come across as bipartisan. They're trying to come across as anything but political hacks. But we see right through them, don't we? We see right through them. Yes, they are political hacks in many cases. They absolutely are. They absolutely are. Now, let me address one more thing before I take a commercial break. Because I've heard some conservatives, I know that I received a message from somebody the other day on one of my YouTube videos who told me, look, stop whining about these social media sites. Why don't you just create your own where you can support free speech? Why don't you just create your own where you can, only allow conservatives, I think you said. It's not a bad idea. We have websites up right now like Gab. I think the actual website is gab.ai, I believe. And that's a fantastic site. I'm sure there's others that are going up. I know that there's a conservative version of YouTube that's currently in the works. But the problem here, folks, is that if you're a conservative looking to advance your message to as many people as possible, looking to reach as many Americans as you possibly can over the internet, the more mainstream social media sites, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, are still the best way to do it. So, of course, the free market capitalist idea would be go and create your own company for conservatives. And again, I'm not opposed to that. As a matter of fact, I support that idea. But what I'm saying is that as it stands right now, if you're a conservative looking to reach as many people as you possibly can, then these sites like Gab just aren't there yet. And it's not their fault. It's not that there's anything wrong with these social media sites. It's just that they're still in the beginning phases, just as every business goes through. And, you know, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I could go to one of these other sites, but my message isn't going to get out there as much. And so I really think that the solution has to be twofold. First of all, yes, we need to continue working on these alternative websites like Gab. Keep building them, and hopefully one day they'll become as big as Twitter and support free speech. Gee, wouldn't that be fantastic? And at the same time, I think that we need to continue to expose these social media sites like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube. We need to continue to expose the censorship that goes on, the suppression of conservative content. We need to keep fighting back. I don't believe in other words, I don't believe in completely retreating from these mainstream social media sites. Because, again, if our goal is to get our message out there to millions of people, then the only way to do that right now is through the mainstream sites. It's unfortunate, but it's just reality. So I think, again, that we need to continue fighting back against them and continue to expose them. As I said before the last commercial break, I'll say it again. I wouldn't be opposed to some kind of law or regulation that limits the amount of censorship that these social media sites can engage in. That puts caps on who they can censor. And obviously such a regulation is meant to bolster the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. I'm not a big regulation guy, but when it comes to defending the Constitution, you got to do what you got to do, folks. You got to do what you got to do. All right, stick with me. I'll be right back. All right, my friends, few minutes left. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to the Jason Veely program. By the way, Caden Calger and I are working on something that's going to blow your minds. It really is. We've been talking a lot about platforms tonight, a lot about where conservatives can go because of this internet censorship and all the rest. Trust me, Caden Calger and I, many of you I'm sure know about Caden. It's another popular young conservative who does a great job and a great radio show. We're working on something really, really special. And this is honestly probably the biggest project that I've ever done in my political career. You guys are really, really going to love it. And we'll keep you posted with it. It's moving right along. We're just not at the point yet where we're ready to, make the big announcement, so to speak, and give you the details. So stay tuned for that. That'll be really good. All right, let me wrap up with this, folks. First, where are we here? Let me get my bearings. From the Daily Caller, before the Escondido City Council in California voted 4-1 to join the Trump administration's lawsuit against the sanctuary state, a legal immigrant gave an impassioned speech about how he came to America. And I wasn't able to get the audio from the full speech, but I did get a portion of it, and I want to play it for you. This guy is a Trump supporter. He's a legal immigrant. He did things the right way. And even though it's only about 30 seconds long, it's just inspirational, and it's really something to listen to. Check it out. Here we go.
I speak to you as an immigrant myself. I came to this country 45 years ago with me and my mother, okay? 45 years ago, we were not offered sanctuary. We were not offered an easier, softer way, okay? We were told you have to be an American citizen and here's what you have to do. And we did it. We worked hard and we put in our time, okay? And I now have a piece of paper hanging on my wall called a naturalization certificate that says I am a proud United States American citizen. And if I can do it, every single person that's a dreamer in this room can do it. Every person that's undocumented in this room, they could do it too.
So there you go. Again, I know it's short. That wasn't the entire speech, but I wanted to play that for you because again, to me, it was really, really inspirational. It makes me think a lot about my great-grandfather, who I've talked about on this program before, who's no longer with us. He passed away a little over 10 years ago, I believe. But he came over when he was a young kid from Sweden. And this was in the early 1900s. I think the year was 1902, I want to say. And he came over with his family on a boat from Sweden. It took months to get here, but they did it the right way. They did it the right way because they wanted to be in the country legally. They wanted to be American citizens. They wanted to be part of this great country. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. We should have an immigration system that specifically looks for individuals like the one you just heard in that soundbite. People who want to come here not for a free ride, not because they know we have a very, very generous welfare state, but because they love this country. But because they want to be here, because they want to contribute to our society. There's nothing wrong with only accepting those types of people in. This is our country, folks. We don't have to accept losers and drug dealers and illegal aliens who aren't vetted into the country. We don't have to do that. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to create the best country we possibly can. For not just us, but for future generations as well. And to make the best country we possibly can, we need the best people. Let me play that for you one more time, folks. Just because it's short, because we have a few more minutes here. Just incredibly passionate. Listen.
I speak to you as an immigrant myself. I came to this country 45 years ago with me and my mother, okay? 45 years ago, we were not offered sanctuary. We were not offered an easier, softer way, okay? We were told you have to be an American citizen and here's what you have to do. And we did it. We worked hard and we put in our time, okay? And I now have a piece of paper hanging on my wall called a naturalization certificate that says I am a proud United States American citizen. And if I can do it, every single person that's a dreamer in this room can do it. Every person that's undocumented in this room, they could do it too.
You know, let me just end on this note. What the liberals are doing to the immigration system, with all these sanctuary cities, taking in illegal aliens, people who didn't come here the right way, it's a disgrace not only to American citizens, but it's also a disgrace and insult to people who are currently in other parts of the world who want to come here the right way. Imagine being them, looking at what's going on and saying, well, gee, why are they coming in illegally and they still get a free pass? I'm coming here legally and I don't get treated nearly as good. Imagine being the legal immigrant today. I'll be back tomorrow, folks. God bless. God save this great nation.